dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
And welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. I was kind of debating on where to start the broadcast off tonight. I am going to get into a little bit of Donald Trump since he's at the top, at least in the mainstream media. Going to get into Texas a little bit. Going to get into America's first feminist and how she was a radical libertarian. But one thing I did want to start off with is Greece. I decided I want to start off with this because if we look at what's going on there, we look at the euro, we look at what they're really, been trying to push for here in America. We see where we're going, and, the healthcare system, we already been warning, this has been tried other places. Look how it's worked out. And, socialism, communism, fascism, none of this is new ideology, nor is it untested. And a lot of people think, well, libertarian ideas are untested. Well, no, they've been tested and they're successful. It's when a society allows for these people to claim authority and power over others and go along with the system, and not only that, engage into the system where you're contributing to it. That usually has crushed because a lot of times the more libertarian societies weren't always the most advanced. Some of them were really advanced, others weren't. And when you have a empire with a whole bunch of people willing to just slaughter people for their land, and you don't have many people standing against that, it makes it easier for them to control, and then eventually you get to a breaking point where then it again turns into violence. And we're seeing that with Greece. They understand, okay, we take another bailout, therefore our taxes go up more, when in reality, who really owes this money? Why are we forced into the system? They voted against this and they still get bailed out. But there's people that I've spoke to that don't understand, because we grow up in America and we kind of have that historical background. Even Andrew Jackson fought against a nationalized bank, a private-owned bank. I'm going to play one here from Stefan Molyneux. I'm not going to play the whole thing. No matter what you think of Stefan Molyneux, He goes into some detail about Greece's history. And this is titled The Fall of Greece, Prepare Yourself Accordingly. You can watch the whole thing. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I do want to play a pretty good chunk of this. And really go into the history of Greece and understand they haven't grown up with the backing that we've had. And, you have to go a lot farther back to find any of that free states, which, you had Athens, Spartan, and yeah, they fought each other, but a lot of times that was always spurred off by one or small group of people um, from one group going over and causing harm. And instead of just blaming on that group of people, it gets blamed on multiple, basically that group. And again, that still goes back to not, you know, judging each individual upon, who they are. Grouping people and it helps to divide and conquer, which, would eventually lead to Greece becoming a nation or empire in a way. Okay, I want to get into this clip here though. Some history on Greece.
Hi, everybody. This is Stefan Molyneux from Freedom Main Radio. I hope you're doing well. This is a tour, a sprint, if you will, through how did Greece end up on the edge of the abyss as it currently stands, who's responsible, what are the trends, and perhaps what can be done. We were actually thinking of putting a chime, like bing, every time something that happened in Greece directly mirrored something that happened in America or England or other Western countries, but it pretty much would be a constant bing fest, so we've decided not to. There are numerous parallels that are highly instructive. So let's go back to the Second World War, 1944, shortly before Nazi Germany withdrew their forces from Greece. A civil war erupted between two anti-Nazi military factions, the communist EAM Elas and the democratic EDES, or EDES. Now, the communists, of course, anti-monarchy. The democratic was anti-monarchy. They wanted a republic that was socialist. So you've got the choice between communists and socialists. Death by beheading, death by slow poison dart, frog poison, and that's what was going on. Now the communists, because nasty people tend to be incredibly dedicated at times, managed to take over virtually the entire country before the British Army, which I'm sure had nothing better to do, defeated them and forced them underground. Now, there was a second outbreak of hostilities in 1946, and of course, concerned about the possible spread of communism, the U.S. backed the democratic forces under the Truman Doctrine, which was established in early mid-1940s. Harry S. Truman said, the U.S. will come to the aid of all democratic nations under threat from an external or internal authoritarian or dictatorial set of forces. And after 3 years of fighting, the communists in Greece were defeated, and the Greek government exiled them and their supporters from the country in a giant political science Ebola sneeze, spreading all of these communists out into neighboring countries. Not great. You have a terrible infection called communism. Let's help you spread it by putting you out of the country. This, of course, from the civilization that killed Socrates, who arguably has done less harm to humanity than the 100 million plus slaughtered by communists throughout to the 20th century. They put Socrates to death, but the communists, who would have established the usual hellhole of starvation and gulags, political oppression, and persecution, they just exiled the communists. Socrates you killed, the communists you exiled. Now, the period after the Greek Civil War was marked by a significant influx of foreign aid. So by 1950, about 50% of Greece's GDP came from the Marshall Plan, which is a U.S. program to aid European countries in the post-war period. Had very little to do with setting up freedom in these countries. You can see the truth about Germany for more on what Germany did in this situation, was actually get free market reforms put in place. But here you see the absolute madness of fighting communism, which is the forced redistribution of income, with the forced redistribution of income through taxes and foreign aid. We'll save you from economic tyranny by subsidizing you to the tune of 50%. I'm sure that will bring about a free market for you. So with all of this international funding, the economy seemed to begin to rise from the ashes of the Civil War, but progress was, of course, very slow. Now, what is called the Greek economic miracle, and we all know how realistic miracles are, in fact, by the mid-1950s, the communist activities had been suppressed, and as one historian noted, once the Greek Communist Party was thoroughly crushed and the country was firmly in the Western sphere of influence, there was no need for the United States to continue economic assistance to Greece. You see, so the lesson is taught that if you destabilize yourself, you'll get huge amounts of foreign aid with which to bribe your citizens into voting for you. But if you get back on your feet, all of those crutches will be taken away and your economic and political futures will fall flat on your face. So Greece was weaned slowly off the foreign aid injections that it had been receiving for years, but that money was replaced by foreign investment. Now, not the good kind of foreign investment, like the foreign investment that arises out of a free market preference for local conditions, but out of a kind of subsidized mercantilism. Following U.S. advice under the grip of massive amounts of cocaine stimulus Keynesianism, the Greek prime minister at the time inflated the money supply, reducing the value of the drachma relative to the dollar by a half, full 50%, and he abolished special import taxes. So the GDP started to rise rapidly, and the period that followed was termed the Greek economic miracle, but not homegrown, not organic, and therefore not sustainable. So the weak drachma and lucrative economic benefits, coupled with U.S. promotion of Greece among American companies, attracted increasing foreign interest and investments. Quote, American businessmen started investing in Greece gradually after the end of the Civil War and escalated such activity after 1953. By the way, the sources, as usual, in the description below. So after 1949, can you smell the delicious aroma of the free market? No, you can't, because after 1949, American firms gained control of major construction and waterworks projects and invested in mining and industry. The government also signed an exclusive contract in June 1949 with an American-based transnational corporation, granting the company a monopoly, yes, not free market, a monopoly of the country's communications network. Similar things, of course, occurring in Mexico at the moment. The Greek economic miracle reflected a pattern which became common in Greece: stagnation without outside investment and financial support. And of course, not for the first time nor for the last time were American companies' votes and they're bought by giving them access to the capacity to export manufacturing jobs overseas. After a period of political instability, following the ouster of King Constantine and a military coup, this ended in 1974, the Greek people voted to establish a constitutional republic instead of returning to a monarchy. The result was met with celebrations in the streets of Athens and other major cities. Now, very big topic. Hans Hoppe has more on this if you want, but a monarchy is not all bad because a monarchy has to give the kingdom to his children, right? So he has to look to the long-term sustainable value of the economy. A democracy is a hyped-up temporary monarchy where you don't care about the long-term value of the country because you can't will it to your descendants. And so monarchies tend to be more sustainable than democracies, which is a massive pillaging of the body politic with very little thought to the future. On January 1st, 1981, Greece joined the European Economic Community, which aimed to bring about economic integration between European member countries. And we've got the truth about the euro just came out. You can check that out on this channel. In the Greek legislative election, October 21st, 1981, the Pan-Hellenic Socialist Movement, PASOK, won a landslide victory over the conservative New Democracy Party. Andreas Papandreou became Greece's first socialist prime minister. The party's main slogan was Alagi, the Greek word for change. I don't know why anybody has any investment in philosophy or goes to school where you can just use the word change to attract people who like stuff for nothing. When Papandreou took power, Greece's public debt was 28% of GDP. The good old days. And borrowing money was relatively easy due to their EEC membership. So without wasting any time, Papandreou and the PASOK government went on a massive government spending spree. So We'll see this over and over again, that the Greeks have a choice between some restraint and pure unbridled government spending. And let's just say it's not a huge shock, given what we're seeing in Greece at the moment, which way the population went. Under Papandreou's Contract with the People program, the new government immediately raised middle and low incomes through a system of wage indexation. They instituted price controls, which of course lead to shortages, introduced tax incentives on investments, which is a payoff for the corporations who can't attract investment on the free market. Therefore, the government has to channel in a 401k style or RSP style tax break. They have to channel money into the stock market that otherwise wouldn't be there. And they offered easy credit to politically favored groups. They expanded the social security system, strengthened labor unions, created a national healthcare system, increased pensions for civil servants, and much, much more. Oh, and he also welcomed back the communists from their exile. So, created a huge minimum wage that was tied to inflation and went on a giant spending spree. Now, not only does that produce like visible distortions, like massive growth in spending in the public sector and so on, what's harder to see is what it crowds out, right? You take all of that money, you funnel it into government programs, you're taking it away from the free market that otherwise might be using it to create sustainable growth. So Papandreou campaigned on an agenda which included exiting the European community. But the alliance was in fact necessary to fund this massive welfare state expansion, which was almost exclusively financed through debt. So the debt to GDP ratio just went through the roof, as we can see. And so, the EEC, it's like the Roach Motel. You can check in, but there's no mechanism by which you can check out, which is why the Grexit is such a challenge at the moment. There's no recognized or known mechanism by which you can get out of the EU. So because they were in the European Commission and they were anticipated to start leeching off or hooking into more responsible countries' credit history, credit rating, then they got a whole bunch of money for free. What would have happened if they had not joined this union is that the interest rates that people were willing to lend Greece at would have gone through the roof, which would have minimized the amount of money that they were able to spend. As New York Times columnist Thomas Friedman noted, quote, Greece, alas, after it joined the European Union in 1981, actually became just another Middle East petrostate, only instead of an oil well, it had Brussels. That's where the EU is headed, which steadily pumped out subsidies, aid, and euros with low interest rates to Athens. And you bought your way in. So, big picture perspective time, less than 40 years after a bloody and violent civil war to oppose communism, which killed 158,000 people out of 9 or 10 million, and relocated over 1 million Greek inhabitants, Greece decided basically to give communism a try anyway. It didn't take long after a democracy was established for the will of the people to be heard loud and clear. With one loud, thunderous, greedy, leech-like voice, they cry, "We want free stuff!" So here is state spending in millions of drachmas, 1974 to 1990, also known as the escalating slope of infinite doom. Well, not quite infinite, I guess. I can only assume that the white line at the bottom is their tax base. But that's the amount of spending that occurred. See, relatively low, right? And then they get in, they get in, they join the EU, and it goes through the roof. And this would normally be limited by higher interest rates in lending, but because they were considered to be backstopped by Brussels, that there would be a lender of last resort called the European Central Bank, people were willing to lend to them because they're basically lending to Germany and other countries. In 1982, government intervention raised weekly earnings in manufacturing by 7.8%. Since there was also a reduction of hours of work, the real hourly remuneration increase reached 10.3%, while at the same time output per person declined by 3%. This is the same kind of stuff that governments always do. Like, you remember Obama was saying, oh, we're going to cut your premiums by thousands of dollars because, he's a business genius with vast amounts of experience in the healthcare provision industry, so he can confidently say that with the power of the state, he can save you lots of money. So he goes into politics rather than becoming an untold billionaire offering better products in the free market, or what's left of the free market in the US. So whenever you see wages going up and output per person declining, it's the hand of the state, or the bloody fist of the state, rearranging things to their own benefit. So this hurt exports, of course, by making Greek goods very expensive overall. So do they repeal this onerous legislation that makes exports More expensive? Of course not. They just devalued the drachma by 15% in January 1983. Now, that makes buying goods out of Greece cheaper. But, of course, currency devaluation makes all of your imports more expensive as well. So due to the wage indexing program, any short-term gain in competitiveness due to cheaper Greek exports was immediately eroded, right? So when you devalue the currency, inflation hits, but because all of your public sector workers have wages indexed to inflation, your costs go up. So you don't actually make anything anyway. You just completely dislocate the economy and confuse anybody with an entrepreneurial bone in their body. The comparative rise in import prices due to the devaluation was immediately transmitted to wages and thus to costs and prices. Ah, the joys of central planning. This vicious cycle made doing business with Greece incredibly difficult, devalued the currency compared to other countries overall, and didn't lead to any increase in exports. The increase in labor costs reduced profitability, and economic growth almost completely stalled, from 3.1% per year in 1975 to 1980 period to 0.7% per year between 1980 and 1985, rising to 1.4 between 85 and 90 when they got some cheap money from the European Union. So the usual crap. So it hurts exports, and more fundamentally, it hurts Greek brains, because you get thrown into this kaleidoscopic frappe blender maker of government regulations and taxations and manipulations and currency devaluations, and it becomes almost impossible to plan for any kind of business. So here are exports of goods and services as percent of GDP from 1960 to 1995. As you can see, quite a bit lower, 10, 15 percentage points. And that, of course, trade imbalance. Imports of goods and services, much higher. Tragically, they were not importing any rational economics textbooks, but this is a big, big problem. So once Papandreou gets into power, exports decreased, but imports remained relatively constant. The massive devaluation of the drachma should make the goods more attractive to outside countries due to the lower cost, but nationalization, wage indexing, and all of that destroys all of that stuff. So this is not a sustainable situation. So these continuous pay rises and other redistributive income policies since the early 80s aided creating this less productive middle class, and they were attracted to almost unrestrained consumerism, especially related to imports. Bing! Given the destabilizing economic policies, Greek businesses declined, as it was difficult for them to compete in both price and quality with outside companies. Greek retail, which had previously been dominated by small family businesses, was overtaken by large wholesale companies. As politics gets more involved in the economy, as the government gains more and more power over the movement of goods and services and capital in an economy, larger companies tend to dominate because they can influence government policy a lot more. So if you care about mom and pop shops, you need to keep the government as far away from the economy as possible. The Greek market was saturated by foreign branded products, particularly electrical goods and automobiles imported under exclusive distributorships. At this time, inflation was over 20%, and approximately 250 Greek businesses employing over 100,000 people, or the equivalent of a couple of million in the US, were in serious economic jeopardy. Businesses survived by sacrificing profits, keeping investment at a minimum, and through borrowing from state banks, right? So when I was an entrepreneur, I was in charge of a research and development department, and it was a challenge, right? Because the business as a whole was always like, oh, this is overhead. I'm like, no, this is the future profits of the company. You can reduce R&D, you can reduce marketing and so on, and you can also offer massive discounts. It's called stuffing the pipe, to people to buy your stuff in the here and now. But all you're doing is inflating your numbers now at the expense of your growth in the future. And this is what happens. People stop investing, worker productivity goes down, and that's really the basis of economic growth. So it appeared these businesses are going to succumb to bankruptcy, but the newly created state-owned Industrial Reconstruction Organization took them over and continued to run them at a loss. Say hello to bailouts, also known as the multi-decade Japanese strangulation of the economy and the fertility of the youth. After initially giving trade unions more power and control, the government reassumed control over labor union activity. The socialization of various important means of production, which was to promote worker participation and improve productivity, instead led to the massive amounts of state subsidies for inept companies, right? I mean, the creative destruction of capitalism requires that companies that are incompetent go out of business, thus releasing the labor and the capital to more productive areas. But of course, everybody who's got a job wants to keep it, while those who would have had jobs if the capital had been reallocated don't even know what they're missing, which is why it doesn't work when you get people to vote on economic policies. Civil servants, and this is a number that is far outstripping the relatively minor growth in population. 1972, 53,000. 1986, a peak of 107,000. And these are people who, it's like a crazy loss to the economy because they're being taken out of the private sector, being put into the public sector, where mostly they're interfering with the private sector. Plus, they're accumulating massive pension obligations and all this, early retirements. And the early retirements, of course, open up new opportunities for young people. You get people to retire at 50 or 55. They're replaced with younger people, which artificially depresses the unemployment numbers, right? Because they're getting these artificial jobs because people are retiring early, and then that pops, as we've seen recently, after the economic crash of 07, 08. In Greece, overall public pension expenditures increased from 5.8 to 10.7% of GDP between 1979 and 1985. So almost doubled in 6 or so years. During the 1980s alone, the number of pensioners increased by a shocking 42%. In 1988, the gap between the pension expenditures and contributions was equivalent to about 3% of GDP's total gross national product. Absolutely unsustainable. Until the late 1970s, Greece had one of the smallest public sectors of any European country. But general government outlays increased dramatically, from 33% of GDP in 1980 to 39% in 1981, 48% in 1985, and 53% in 1990. So again, almost doubling in a matter of 10 years. And it's not good when the socialists are worse for the economy than the military dictatorship of the late 60s and early 70s. Greece also won for itself with the special socialist prize of the highest inflation rate of any European country during the 1980s. Consumer prices increased by more than 13% a year since 1978, and sometimes by nearly twice that rate. By 1985, the annual inflation rate had risen to 25%, which led to a further devaluation of the drachma. This is the price change of goods and services since 1970, 1980 to 1995. This is Italy, France, Spain, Germany, the UK, and Greece. Germany scraping the bottom of the barrel of fiscal sanity once more. Hey, let's save up all this money so we can give it to Greece later. And here you can see, I don't know, if you squint, try closing one eye and squint, you might be able to see the outlier, which is the Greek fiscal cliff of doom. And that is mad. Absolutely mad. Price change of goods and services since 1970. This is 1970 to 2014. Here you can see, right, this is wider. Italy, France, Spain, Germany, United Kingdom, and Greece. Germany, traditional lady, she's always on the bottom. And Greece, of course, just going completely insane. You can see here there's quite a lot of convergence. The socialists get in power. Government spending. And remember, the Greeks had a choice between fiscal restraint and fiscal splurging, right? They had a choice. They have consistently had a choice between people promising them something for nothing and people offering them rational restraint. And which way have they gone? I think the graph shows you. So in addition to swelling the ranks of public sector employment through the nationalization of key industries and the Industrial Reconstruction Organization that drips vital blood to zombie organizations, tens of thousands of additional government jobs were created in state companies and then given to PASOK's party members. In the 1980s, the public sector increased in size. Most of its posts were filled, of course, with party appointees. So that at the end, the public sector became basically an extension of the PASOK political party. The party simply used massive amounts of deficit spending instead of considering necessary privatization or potential public sector layoffs. Senior positions within universities and local councils became political appointees. Public construction licenses were often awarded on the basis of political support, with politicians lining their pockets through regular and expected kickbacks. Greece has been called one of the most corrupt countries, not just in the European Union, but in the world itself. Corruption was rampant. Those who wanted to get ahead had to kneel at the altar of state power. If you want to know Greece, pick up a copy of Atlas Shrugged, flick through the pages, and you'll get it. Like, done. these employees' earnings were subject to wage indexation and took a massive toll on the future financial solvency of the country. Not surprisingly, worker productivity remained incredibly low. See, by wage indexation, that also desensitizes the workers to inflation, because they're like, inflation is 15%, so my wages went up 15%. That's all at the expense of the private sector and people who don't have this kind of benefit. But it keeps people from getting upset, in the same way that unemployment insurance keeps the unemployed from getting restless. This stuff keeps people from complaining about inflation. Real hourly earnings fell by more than 13% between 1985 and 1992. Basically, socialism is inflicting a grievous injury on your body and then hoping that the high of morphine makes up for it. Hey, look, now we're addicted and our life changes completely. So this is unemployment, 1980 to 1995, unemployment rates. And Germany doing fairly well, Portugal doing fairly well, Spain, yay, worse than Greece. And Greece remains relatively low, of course, because they're pouring all of this money into the public sector. And they're forcing people to retire, they don't count as unemployed, which opens up new job opportunities for the young, sucks them into the public sector, where they vaporize like smoke in a whirlwind in terms of their economic productivity and potential to last in the private sector. So there's artificial depression that occurs with this stuff. Unemployment 1980 to 2012. So as you can see here, late 80s, the EU takes hold. 1999, the euro is used in B2B, business-to-business, and bank transfers. By 2002, the euro is then used by the general population. And as you can see, crushes everything down, as we saw in The Truth About the Euro, provides this artificial subsidy from more responsible to less responsible economies. And then in the '08 crisis, we see, of course, again, this stuff goes through the roof. And yay, it just overtook Spain in 2013 and change. So it's all a mad illusion. Per capita income, net inflation adjusted GDP in 2015. This is not inflation adjusted. So this is per capita income. As you can see, it's rising. Now the military junta that was in place is, from the late 60s to 1974, the per capita income is growing. And then the socialists get in power, and it seems like it rises, but it's all just nonsense, because the spike that goes on, you see when they start taking on the euro in 2002, the per capita income goes up like crazy, and then now it's crashing down, and it's probably got further to go. I mean, the amount of misallocation of resources has been going on for 2 generations, at least, in Greece, and that's going to take some time to unravel. This is per capita income in inflation-adjusted real GDP in 2005 euros, right? So it looks like incomes are doing better, but when you adjust for inflation, you can see here in the late 60s to early 70s, there is a big growth in the economy under a military dictatorship. And then the socialists get in power, and all of the increase start to stagnate. And this is just a huge mess. And then, of course, there's this cocaine boost from the artificial lashing of Greece to the more responsible countries in the 2000s. Government spending and revenues as a percent of GDP. So, one of the marks of a not intelligent and responsible population is they want free stuff but don't want to pay their taxes. I don't even know how to explain this. If you want the government to give you stuff, you have to give the government stuff. They're not some rich uncle who made money asteroid mining for unicorn tears and gold. They have no money. The government has no money. Everything they give you, they have to take from someone. If you don't want to pay your taxes, you have to stop asking for stuff. But maybe that's asking for people to be a bit more K-selected than R-selected. Check out The Truth About the Gene Wars on this channel. So they spend money that they're not willing to raise their taxes. And here you get these ridiculous situations where a significant portion of people on one island in Greece claim that they're blind, including a bird hunter and a cab driver. They claim to be blind, and then they send reporters out there, and they see all these blind people playing tennis and driving cars, maybe with echolocation. I don't know, maybe they're half bat. and you get, when the government says, oh, you got to prove now that you're disabled, like 35 or 36,000 people just don't show up, right? Because they're all just scamming the whole system. And this is just monstrous, just monstrous. This gap is well known in Greece. Everybody says, oh, would you like a receipt or no? We can do cash, right? I mean, it's all nonsense. Total tax revenue is percent of GDP. So here again, we look at Greece. So the spending has gone through the roof. The tax revenues remain at the bottom of the EU pack: France, Italy, Germany, Spain, and the UK. And Germany, of course, again, there's that stable stuff which we talked about in The Truth About the Euro. In 2010, about 40% of Greeks did not pay any tax. And about 95% of tax returns were for less than 30,000 euros a year. Massive tax evasion costs the state budget 20 to 30 billion euros a year, which is 2/3 of the deficit for 2009. So there's an example of swimming pools in Athens. So swimming pool is an indication of wealth, if you're Greek, of course, and the Greek revenue uses them to try and figure out whether you're being honest about your taxes. So in 2009, only 364 people said that they had pools at home. Satellite photos revealed that there were almost 17,000. Wait, 364, 17,000. Yeah, I think that's higher. Private house pools in Athens. So only 2.1% of the people living in Athens submitted, who owned pools, submitted honest tax forms. And I mean, want free stuff, won't pay your taxes, and then you're going to whine about the bankers? Are you kidding me? Whine about the bankers? It's not the bankers, people. Look in the mirror if you want to know why Greece is in trouble. Greece's debt to GDP ratio. What can I tell you, right? So from the 90s, they got into the. It was also ahead of time. Like if they knew they were going to get into the people knew they were going to get into the euro, then they lent them advantageously, knowing that they were going to basically have a lender of last resort who was going to prop up Greece when Greece couldn't pay its bills, which is, of course, exactly what has happened. So they bet correctly. Currencies versus gold, 1980 to 1999. Now here, again, close one eye, squint through your eyelashes, and see if you can tell me where the socialists got in power in Greece. Yes, that's right, in the early 1980s. And here you can see this massive jump. The Deutschmark, again, ladylike, thinking of the future. On the bottom, they are, you get the socialists in, and you can see this madness that occurs. Greek national health system introduced in 1983 aimed to make free healthcare available to all citizens. Non-contributory.
Okay, I'm going to stop that right there. Now, I don't agree with them completely because there was manipulation. There's manipulation with the euro. And yes, you know, the Greeks have made very bad decisions, but it's also one of those things, they're also being put into situations where the government goes along with something and they push it upon the public eats it up because while they're already being taxed, they're thinking that they're getting back what they're already paying in. But if you look at government is never going to give you back what you're already paying in that you don't think that you're getting your money's worth. You're saying, I pay too much taxes for this to be this way. So they go, we're going to put a bill out there to get this stuff fixed. And you're like, yeah, finally, you know, I'm paying all these taxes and they're not even keeping up their end of the deal. Now they're going to finally do it. Well, no, what that means is they're going to end up taxing you more because they're not willing to not pay the crony friends, and you're going to end up having to pay because, well, too many of their crony friends are getting all the subsidies. And then also the welfare state creates another subsidy for these companies. Kind of how Walmart likes to pay their employees very little. That way they can get benefits from the government. How nice are they? Now, a lot of us say, we didn't agree to this. A lot of times the older people forget that, well, you didn't vote for that. You're just being brought into this world where they're saying, hey, you owe us. You're like, what do I owe you for? Well, we've been protecting you and blah, blah, blah. Really? Didn't know that. And so the youth out there are being put in a situation where they're already in debt, even though they haven't accrued the debt. They claim that previous generations put you in debt. So it's a continuation where they're going, I'm in debt. You guys need to at least keep the roads up, and we see it doesn't happen though. And for you to get that road, you have to agree to more taxes. And it's kind of that ignorant state. Now, I'm going to read this article. We'll kind of stay in the currency and banking system type area, the financial area. Texas launches gold-backed bank, challenging Federal Reserve. This out of Infowars.com. The state of Texas is setting up a gold-backed bank that will allow depositors to bypass the controversial Federal Reserve System and its fiat currency in banking and commerce, according to a state representative who authored the recently enacted law. Under the measure passed overwhelmingly by lawmakers and signed in mid-June by Republican Governor Greg Abbott, Lone Star State official will establish and operate the Texas bullion depository for anyone who would like to deposit and trade in precious metals. The implications are as big as Texas. While some analysts have said the move may be another sign heralding Texas' eventual succession from the Union or preparation for financial Armageddon, its advocates say the depository simply makes financial sense. Among other benefits, the institution will provide more options to consumers wary of the increasingly troubled traditional banking and monetary system, which is viewed by the public with growing suspicion. And experts say the effect of making it easier to use sound money as commerce could be far-reaching. Among other immediate effects, the law creating the first state-level gold-backed bank in the nation, House Bill 483, will involve repatriating about $1 billion of Texas gold from New York. Conflicting news reports and official statements say the state's precious metals stockpile is being held either by HSBC in New York or by the powerful New York Federal Reserve Bank, a privately owned outfit cloaked in secrecy with immense power over the U.S. economy. First, though, officials will need to select a home for the Texas depository. Today, I signed HB 483 to provide a secure facility for the state of Texas, state agencies, and Texas citizens to store gold bullion and other precious metals, said a statement issued by Governor Abbott, a popular conservative governor. After the ceremonial signing with the passage of this bill, the Texas Bullion Depository will become the first state-level facility of its kind in the nation, increasing the security and stability of our gold reserves and keeping taxpayer funds from leaving Texas to pay for fees to store gold in facilities outside our state. The law protects the assets from seizure by the feds or other forces too. There will be many other benefits as well, according to supporters, while other states have in recent years passed legislation declaring gold and silver to be legal tender. Analysis say Texas' new depository could help supercharge the growing movement for an honest and sensible monetary system founded on real money rather than debt-based paper notes conjured into existence by a private banking cartel. Indeed, one of the chief aims of gold and silver as currency proponents is to restore sound money, and the Texas law could help pave the way. And that was originally from the New American, but I found it at Infowars.com. And I have a Ron Paul Liberty report. Inflation on the rise. Your move, Miss Yellen. Cue that up here.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Good to see you, Daniel.
Good to see you, Dr. Paul.
I want to talk about inflation. The country's always talking about inflation. Austrian economists always talk about inflation. They try to get the right definition out, but they generally don't. You can have inflation of the money supply, but government agents always talk about increasing prices. Anyway, I'm going to talk about the release today from the Labor Department about the PPI. And for June, it went up 0.4%. And on top of a 0.5% in May. So if you put those together, prices are currently going up at 6% a year. And of course, this is sort of what the Fed prays for. Oh, everything's going to be okay if we can get prices going up 2%, as if that's going to help the consumer. But anyway, that's their goal. And my point that I'd like to make on this is, yes, I think prices are going up, but I think they will come to a point where they're not going to be happy with this price inflation that they're seeing, because they don't think that it will ever occur again, and they don't think about it, that you can have inflationary depressions like Zimbabwe, where you have runaway inflation and deep depression. Mm-hmm. I don't think we're on the verge of that, but you also can have subtle, steady, harmful inflation that is in the middle of a recession. And this puts, I think, the Fed in a box. And one thing that I think the Fed is in trouble with is they claim, Yellen's been saying, we're going to raise them maybe 2 times this year, and things are going well, and they're talking themselves into a healthy economy, although they fudge all these figures, all the employment figures, and also, so they're talking about raising these interest rates. But you can see, what might happen if the inflation is 2, 3, or 4%. That will make them put dampers on increasing rates, because that's when they're supposed to back off. And also, in the midst of a recession, that's also a reason why they can't raise interest rates. So I've sort of argued that I don't expect the Fed, to raise the interest rates, but time will tell.
I think we heard even, I saw something on Zero Hedge today from Janet Yellen, and she seemed to be hedging the terms a little bit. She was much more emphatic earlier this year about raising the rates, and now she said something like, if things keep going according to projections or something.
Oh, they always cover themselves, and they work hard at preparing the markets. They believe now that they prepared the markets well enough for a little increase in interest rates, which, in theory, a fraction increase in the interest rate shouldn't hurt anything. But the real evil here is the fact that they talk about, what's the Fed going to do? What does the Fed know? How much should it raise it? That's where the real problem is, as if they knew. But it has a lot of effect because everybody's watching it and they're going to react to it, and they don't know what it is, but they never are open to the suggestion. Well, maybe the market rate of interest is important, and the market rate of interest is a price, and of course, prices. If you don't have prices, guess what you have? Socialism, and then you have shortages and all the problems of the world. So.
We talked just a little while ago, a few days ago, about the improving labor market, and everything sounded great. And then we put on that chart that showed participation in the labor force.
Yeah, down to 63% now, worse than ever. and they just don't count the people who are part-time workers. Full-time workers, that chart we showed also revealed that full-time employment was getting much, much worse. And yet they're saying, well, it's coming along. It looks like we're getting strong. But the other thing that the Fed is facing up to is that the Bernankes and the Yellens of the world, their expertise is in depression, studying the Great Depression, but they didn't read Murray Rothbard's The Great Depression and understand how the Fed messed up in the 20s with the Republicans, and then they came in and there was a predictable crash, but their whole idea, including the monetarists, accepted it. In 1937, some people think we're near 1937. Things look like they're improving a little bit. Interest rates are way below market, nothing like they are today. So why don't we start bumping up the interest rates? They did that, and then the economy promptly crashed. I think it was, it hadn't recovered. And I think that's where they are today, and psychologically, it could be very harmful. They know that. But the worst scenario for the Fed would be that they have to acknowledge that prices are going up, and that 2% is ridiculous. I think when they finally get that 2% and it's 4%, they're going to be all this time hoping and praying for inflation. They're going to be unhappy with it. But then they're going to have a weak economy and loss of confidence, and then there'll be some type of an emergency. Yellen, in her testimony today, recognized that Greece and China are problems. And Mark Faber mentioned the other day, he actually, claims that China is the big deal. Greece isn't. Greece is small, and the euro, as big as it is, he still put more emphasis on China. She's starting to recognize that. So you can see if the Chinese economy topples and really goes down and worse than they claim it is, along with these problems, I don't think the Fed, no matter how well-intended they are, and I'm sure they're well-intended, they think they're smart. They think they're smarter than the market, and interest rates, that's old-fashioned. Well, I think what is old-fashioned is dictatorships and money control and governments and control banking and interest rate. And in recent years, it's been central banking. The last 100 years, it's been universal central banking with a currency, none of them are backed, and of course it's all based on the value of the dollar. So I'm not yet optimistic about what's going on, other than the fact that there's so much information out there that people are becoming skeptical of what's happening. And I think if they look at history, not just at this silliness of 1937 interest rate rise, but looking at history and finding out that central economic planning in the business cycle comes from a very precise source, and that is the Federal Reserve System and the central banks, whether it's our central bank or the European central banks, but all of these produce a problem. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report, and I am concerned that the Fed has no control whatsoever, and no matter what they do, it's going to make things worse. They can't control the rate of price increases. They can control the rate of monetary inflation, how many new dollars, but that's totally out of control. It's just not been discounted by the marketplace. So today we see that the PPI is going up, retail sales are going down. I believe once we get this price inflation that the Fed has worked so hard to get, because that would be a sign of strength in the economy, we'll find out that prices rising in a weak economy is a disaster, and will put the Fed between the rock and the hard place, and they won't have any idea what to do, and they will not consider the only answer, and that is get out of the way and let the market determine what the interest rates ought to be. Just provide a sound currency for us. That would solve a lot of our problems and avoid us turning into Greece. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report, and please come back soon.
I wish he had a video out here about the new banking system in Texas, because, basically what they're doing is what we used to do on the national level, and that's back our currency, basically by having gold and silver to back it. not sure exactly how it'll work out, what type of federal attention it might get, and basically what will eventually happen with it. I'm not sure. Okay. Second here. Okay. Going to kind of move on here. And I had one here from Infowars.com. Facebook censors post revealing secret bill to ban GMO labeling. Facebook is actively censoring shares of an article regarding a federal bill aiming to ban GMO food labeling. Multiple users of the social media platform were finding themselves unable to share an article entitled, "This New Bill Okay, it looks like I'm back. Looks like I lost connection for a second there. But it says, instead of allowing immediate shares, Facebook prompts users with an error that reads, "This message contains content that has been blocked by our security systems," according to a screen capture provided by author Anthony Gucciardi. It says here, "Message failed. This message contains content that has been blocked by our security systems. If you think you're seeing this by mistake, please let us know." Other users are required to answer security check questions in order to share the article after a message promptly reads, "It looks like this link that you are sharing might be unsafe." And I've actually found this on multiple articles lately, out of a lot of Truth, Libertarian, and other websites, well-known websites. But it says here, and you can see the screenshot, it looks like the link you are sharing might be unsafe. Please remove this link. If you are sure you want to share this link, please complete the security check below. And it says here, please select all the photos which show a waterfall. And you click them all and then hit submit. The official March Against Monsanto Facebook page is also filled with comments from people who say they were initially prevented from sharing this story. Says here, Infowars.com mirrored the article and was also prevented from sharing it on their Facebook page. The apparently controversial report posted yesterday to Natural Society and published on Infowars.com as a featured story breaks down how the bill sponsored by Monsanto supporter Representative Mike Pompeo could soon ban all mandatory GMO labeling in the U.S. More precisely, has been dubbed to be the Monsanto Protection Act on steroids. Gucciardi states in the article describing how the bill was drafted up by the Grocery Manufacturers Association and pushed on us by all the usual suspects all the ones who are afraid of you actually knowing what's in your food. According to Gucciotti, Facebook's efforts to prevent the spread of information represents a sinister suppression of ideas and only serves to magnify the importance of the article. We've seen thousands of reports regarding the censorship of content by Facebook and others regarding the TPP, Monsanto, and similar topics, said Gucciotti. The bottom line here is that this article is being blocked across numerous platforms under the guise of a security threat, when we know full well that the sites are perfectly safe. This content blocking only further acts to highlight the powerful message behind the secretive bill being put forth by Congress to ban GMO labeling and dismantle the opposition against Monsanto. And I got a quick clip here to play.
We are back live, breaking censorship news, and it shows how covert it is, and why Zuckerberg goes to Bilderberg and is on such an inside track with the TPP, with this pump and dump operation that's Facebook. Anthony Gucciotti has the breaking report from Infowars.com.
This is really, really disturbing stuff, because for the first time that I'm aware of, talking to some of the developer experts we talked to, some of the SEO people that have ties with Google, this is the most blatant attempt at censorship that I've ever seen from Facebook, because it's not just blocking all of InfoWars, it's blocking one article on numerous platforms. And so yesterday night...
And then we check with other people with their Facebooks. They can't do it either.
Exactly. So we're going to show you some images. It's all on Infowars.com right now. So there's an article that I wrote called "This New Bill Could Ban GMO Labeling for Good." It's about HR 1599. It's been called the Monsanto Protection Act on steroids. And what it would do is it would literally ban GMO labeling in the United States. And as you can see on screen, if you're a radio listener, I tried to share this article on Facebook, and I received an update that this message contains content that has been blocked by our security systems. And it says, you know, if you think this is a mistake, let us know. And I thought, well, this is a weird glitch, because I'm not immediately going to say, oh, they're censoring me, right? So I kind of left it alone. Then I started getting about 100 emails that it was blocked on Facebook. And then I heard from another major group, March Against Monsanto, which has millions of followers. They couldn't share it. Tens of thousands of people were unable to share it. And here's what the crazy part is. So I'm going to show you this as well. You try to share this article, and you get this crazy thing, a security check. You know, obviously they know that all these platforms are free of viruses. Now,
they're playing along, acting like you've done something just because they don't want Americans to know about legislation.
Exactly. And, you know, what it's looking like is a lot of people are saying they were blocking TPP-related articles. This is now a per-article blocking.
That's because the word is that's in TPP. Exactly. It's banning GMO labeling. So because it's connected to TPP with Congress, it's being killed.
Right. And to be clear, this isn't just some glitch. We've had everybody look into this. I mean, I know what I'm doing development-wise too, but we've had others look into this in the back end. There's no errors. There's no security issue. There are no viruses. And to make it even more clear, it is blocked on Infowars.com as a featured story, but you can share other featured stories. This is 100% blacked out across the board and on other platforms too. It is blacked out. You cannot share this post. We've tried everything. We've tried changing the title, the URL. It is blacked out. It'll work for 5 minutes after we switch it out, and then it'll be blocked again.
Well, the answer is everybody's going to take this live 5 minutes. We'll put the video up and call it "Monsanto Loves You and Your Family." Or "This video is not censored," and see what they do. Or call it "Puppy Dogs and Kittens." And then all we're doing is and then they're going to ban the video.
Right.
But they're just testing what they can get away with. It's pretty amazing.
It is amazing, and it ties into some other news that we've seen, too, in these past few weeks, like such as this article. Apple mind control news is on the way, where they feature what you're allowed to read and what you're not. And then Facebook changes newsfeed algorithm to affect media content. Social media giant admits post reach and referral traffic could potentially decline.
Oh, yeah. The fix is in. Folks, better not take InfoWars or Drudge Report or WorldNet Daily for granted. Tell friends and family about the broadcast. And I'm sorry to callers. If you give us your name and number, we'll call you back Sunday or the Sunday show and put you to the head of the line. I'm just out of time with this breaking news. I was going to go to your calls, but I couldn't. Also, I skipped a break last hour and never plugged. Buy the books, buy the videos, free shipping at InfoWarsStore.com. We're selling out of X2. I've been telling you it's going to happen the last few weeks. It did sell out for 2 weeks. It's going to sell out now. Super Male Vitality is about to sell out. Brain Force is sold out. Liver Cleanse is sold out. Liver Shield. So 6 of our 14 products are sold out. The ProstaGuard is back in. InfoWarsLife.com. Your purchase supports our broadcast while we still have self-funding, voting with your dollars. Please take action. Free shipping in the month of July. 25% off on the Molon Labe belt buckles. 10% off on all the T-shirts. It's time to really fund this operation so we can get more reporters. We are launching on TV in the next few months. That's a done deal.
Okay. Now, we know Facebook has been censoring. Ben Swan's even covered the Facebook censoring. Many of us know it from all the way back 07, 06, 08. A lot of Ron Paul supporters from his second run as a Republican for president. First time he ran as a Democrat, or not Democrat, Libertarian. But he ran for 08, did not get the nomination, of course. That's when the real big censoring of Ron Paul initially began. Before the real initial push as a candidate for president, before, the money bombs, any of that started, when it was just a lot of sharing of literally just years and years and years of Ron Paul being consistent and really having a deep libertarian philosophy and knowing his history. It was able to be shared on Facebook pretty freely. Moment he came up for candidate, you could share any other Republican candidate, but Ron Paul, no. Fox News basically kept him out of debates, even though he was actually getting pretty good numbers and they were going up and up. And Fox News said, no, can't do it. Then we seen the continual censorship of him when he ran again because of the push for people to get him to run. Censorship again, and even Ben Swan again covered it and talked about the censorship. And TPP, police brutality, a lot of stuff lately has been getting these messages. I've shared quite a few that I've gotten these recent messages, and it's getting to the point you really see where Facebook aligns itself with, and it's extremely big government because that is what makes Facebook extremely wealthy. Zuckerberg has never been known to be a nice guy, a sociable guy. He from what I've read of him and watched things about him, and seems like he really has a resentment towards people. And a lot of it comes from his, ability to think beyond maybe other people's scope. And, I find that too. You talk to people and they literally know nothing unless you're talking sports. And I'm like, this is just kind of unbelievable. It's almost like I'm in a different universe, or in the movie Idiocracy. And I'm talking to people, and it's like, I can't have a conversation with these people. Because the last thing I'm worried about is sports. You look at these people that not only do they maybe have a above average IQ, let's say, they also have one, ego, and two, a resentment towards others because maybe they were bullied, picked on, outsiders, and they hold some type of resentment, and there shouldn't be. Why should you resent people that maybe bullied you but are not anywhere near, as accomplished maybe as you, that are unhappy with their life now, but you studied, or, you shouldn't hold resentment for that. Just work hard, do it for you, and, keep a moral stance on things. That's what we've really lost. And, people are like, yeah, greed and people only working for themselves. And it's like, no, I really believe people should work for themselves, but hold a set of morals, kind of the golden rule, do unto others as you would want done unto yourself. You don't want to eat poison, don't feed other people poison. And we just really, society has really went away from that. So you either have people that think everything should be given to them, or think that to get what they want, it's just fine to screw people over, stab people in the back, and give them bad product. And there's people out, yeah, that's why our country needs to get back to Christianity. And no, it's not really that. You can claim that Christianity holds some of these morals. You can claim other religions hold some of these morals. Other ideologies hold some of these morals, but don't make it something divisionary where it's, we need to get back to Christianity. That's your belief. But if we can agree on the morals, that's where we can agree, together, and not allow a divide and conquer to happen. And that's not pitting down a religion. That's saying, look, this religion holds the same morals as I do. We might not believe that the morals came from the same place, or, where that set of morals came from, but we can agree that those are good morals. Like, don't cause harm to other people. Don't steal from other people. Do unto others as you would want done upon yourself. And it's just, we've gone so far away from that. Do we have the ability to go back to that without going through a violent period? And, history has shown that it can happen, but history has shown that it also can go the opposite way. And I guess it really depends on where you believe our country is right now. Now, we've talked about the collapse, talked about Greece, talked about Federal Reserve, talked about the censorship about on Facebook, which it's also been related to a lot of economic news. And I'm not going to play this clip, but I did have a clip up. Mark Dice at it again, selling 1 ounce gold for $25 when it's worth $1,500. And, it goes about the same way as all of his other videos. People don't want it. They don't go for it, and they miss out. Okay, let me see where we're at. Okay. I'm going to play this one because, I've talked about it multiple times. When you have a economy going down the crapper, you tend to see gold and silver being bought up by wealthy countries and wealthy people. And if you've been following this broadcast, any of this, you would know that China, Russia, been buying up gold and silver just like it's going out of style. Well, according to AMTV, insiders are buying gold and silver and oil before economic collapse. And we've seen this happen before. And before the '08 collapse, you started seeing we buy gold places popping up. This was before the collapse. And they were popping up everywhere, coming on TV. And then after the collapse, twice as many popped up. And I've known a few people that said that they might have to sell some stuff to get some money. And it really doesn't look like our economy's doing too well. But this from AMTV, insiders buying gold, silver, and oil before economic collapse.
Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Green. You're tuning into AMTV Alternative Media Television this Friday. Happy Friday. Somebody in the comment section a few days ago said, I wish Christopher would do these impromptu videos again, when he used to do a video in his car or something like that. So I'm kind of doing that, although I'm not driving because it's probably dangerous driving and shooting video at the same time. Today I want to talk about what's happening in the resource sector, specifically with gold and silver, which I view as a buying opportunity. I think it is very opportunistic that we have gold prices, what the pundits are saying is about to hit a new low. They're very bearish. Gold, suddenly everything in the world is fixed. Greece is fixed. The third bailout has worked. $86 billion in credit extension that's only going to last for 3 years has worked. 0% interest rates into infinity has worked. Tech is on fire. If you notice the earnings reports from companies like Google, Netflix have sent the stock, especially with Netflix, parabolic. So there's all this euphoria once again because when you give the system a crack in the form of 0% interest rates, this is what Wall Street loves. Of course, most of the people probably on Wall Street are probably sniffing some of this stuff as it is already, especially when you look at people like Jim Cramer, for example. So what I see happening is this breakdown in the resource sector specifically. All this bearishness on the oil market, which has been hammered in recent months, which is off 50%, from the recent peak already. Some of these companies, some of these drillers off 70, 80% from where they were a year ago. We see gold and silver being hit. Silver, I believe, is under 15 an ounce today in today's trading, which I view as a very big opportunity. We have gold under 1,200 an ounce. I also view as a buying opportunity. And all of this bearishness that suddenly the world, everything's just working. That, again, all of this funny money and this scam that makes up the Ponzi scheme at the Federal Reserve is going to result in cherry blossoms, gumdrops, and Snicker bars for everybody in America and around the world. Now, of course, we know this won't last, just like it didn't last in 2008 and 2009, which was the greatest financial crash we have seen in world history, arguably since the 1930s and the great crash of 1929. Now the bubble's bigger. There's been more crack released onto the market in the form of QE, 0% interest rates, stimulus, all of these programs, et cetera, ad nauseum. I have a question for you. If companies like Goldman Sachs are still so bearish oil, they're calling for new lows in oil, even though it's already been hammered, and they might be right, might go lower before there's consolidation. There might be capitulation. Maybe that's needed. If oil prices are so cheap, if all these companies are getting hammered, why are gasoline prices going up? Have you noticed that? That only just proves that there's a cartel. Gas prices are up month over month over the last 2 months. I think 2 months ago it was up 17% if you're looking at the CPI. Gasoline specifically up like 4% in the recent month based on some of the numbers. Food prices going up. So price of living, cost of living is going up, while at the same time they're telling us that all these resources, there's too much supply. They sold us that bullshit for years. Peak oil. There's too much, there's not enough supply, there's not enough. Remember, it was peak oil theory at the time. Prices, at these all-time highs. Now there's too much. Now the Saudis are angry, they're flooding the market. I mean, you see how all this is just total manipulation. It's a cartel. Looking at Iran specifically, there's all this talk on Wall Street, hear people talking about it, how now that we've got a nuke deal, suddenly there's going to be even more supply in the market. Well, did you know, if you just look at the raw, hardcore numbers, that Iran maybe can put 500,000 barrels a day more in oil to the market? That's how much more supply they can add to a 90 million barrel a day market. So 500,000 roughly to a 90 million per day market. That's it. That is totally insignificant. So even if they push supply from tankers of, let's say, 2 million barrels a day, as a part of this nuke deal right away, that's still not flooding the market. So this whole idea that there wasn't enough before, now there's too much, just goes to show you how much bullshit is tied into all of these shenanigans. I personally view this as an opportunity. Again, when people are running for the hills, when the common mantra on Wall Street is to do a specific thing or to fear a specific thing, do the opposite. Do the opposite of what the herd is telling you to do. And a lot of the times the insiders are doing the exact opposite of what they're telling you to do as it is. So me personally, I view it as an opportunity. I view this opportunity in resources, gold and silver as an opportunity, with silver below 15, gold under 1,200 an ounce. I view the oil sector, the energy sector, the integrateds, the drillers as an opportunity. I think there's way too much negativity built into this. Things still may go lower in the short run, and we very likely may need capitulation in this area of the market. But long term, I think that these are select opportunities that a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, you're going to wish that you added to your position dollar cost average into the precious metals market. You're going to wish you bought some of these integrated names, companies like ExxonMobil, for example, and others. You're going to wish you participated in the oil sector when things had already been hammered, or bought some of these natural gas companies when things have already been hammered. Again, buy when there's blood on the streets, buy low and sell high, not in reverse. And what we're seeing in other parts of the market, tech specifically, and although I am bullish long-term tech, you can't argue the fact that it's been totally and utterly parabolic. I mean, the move we've seen in Netflix, I think they had a 7-to-1 stock split recently, so it went from 100 to 117 bucks per share. A huge move a few days ago. Google made a huge move. I mean, these are parabolic moves, and anybody knows it's been in the business long enough that parabolic moves generally don't end well on the upside or the downside. Same thing we're seeing in China now with a doubling of their stock market, the Shanghai Composite, over the last 12 months, followed by a crash of 30%. Some are comparing to the 1930s crash. We've seen all this artificial government intervention, courtesy of the Chinese central bank. We're seeing this all over the world, whether or not it's in Europe or in the United States. And the fat lady still has not sung. Anyone that thinks that Greece is resolved is either lying to you or they're just plain dumb. And they don't understand the economics or the politics behind this. Anybody that says that the United States is out of the woods after tacking on $18 trillion worth of debt recently, more than any other president combined under the presidency of Barack Obama and his 2 terms, is either lying to you or dumb. It's an upside-down pyramid scheme. It will not end well. And history, and time will tell, history will prove that these people, these cheerleaders, which really is just a studio at CNBC or any of these other channels, these cheerleaders are wrong. Many of them likely doing the exact opposite of what they're telling you on a daily basis. Cheering these markets, cheering this stimulus, cheering this crack, this heroin being injected into the veins of our economy. It is about time, and this is financial terrorism. I talked about this yesterday. It is about time we began to normalize interest rates. And the only reason why they're not normalizing interest rates, because the second they do, anything meaningful, and I'm talking more than 25 bips or more than 50 bips, expect total economic Armageddon. A bigger, larger, more violent, deadly move than what we saw in 2008 and 2009. Again, actions speak louder than words. If there was any confidence, a semblance of confidence coming from these people, they would begin to meaningfully normalize interest rate policy, because they know that as a consequence of not normalizing interest rate policy, it will end, again, in an economic shock, in another black swan event, of which many of these bankers have been warning about. People like the heads of Goldman Sachs, which pretty much own the Federal Reserve, people like Jamie Dimon of Chase Bank, people like Bill Gross, formerly of PIMCO, now of Janus Investments, warning us of illiquidity, especially in the bond market, specifically regarding high-yield bonds, etc. All of this plays into future events. Again, buy low, sell high. Be very unemotional about this. Look at gold, look at silver, precious metals as an opportunity. Look at the heavily beaten resource sector as an opportunity. Look at commodities and a recent sell-off in this area as an opportunity. I'm Christopher Green. Get this video out everywhere. Make it viral. Hard-hitting it in your face. And click the link below to visit our sponsor.
Okay. Now, if we look at what he was saying, what Ron Paul was saying, what has happened in Greece, but especially what's happened in China. You know, as soon as they're blatantly freezing, trading in China, and we have our glitch here on the New York Stock Exchange and how it was going down. And basically, the Federal Reserve sitting on that button to, bring interest rates up. Like Ron Paul and Christopher Green were saying, that's when you're going to really see what that money in your pocket is worth. And when you do it, like Ron Paul said, in a bad economy, or fictitiously created good economy, just because when stock markets are up, they call it good. When people are no longer filing for unemployment, all of a sudden they're not unemployed anymore. When we have all this going on, and the want by the Federal Reserve to raise interest rates, knowing what will happen, that is where you'll see turmoil, because in a weak economy, a rise in interest rates will devastate the impoverished community. And with the gap being there with middle class, which we have none, and the people that are in poverty, even though our poverty level is pretty BS. A single person without kids is $15,000. You're lucky to be able to live in a studio apartment for that. Someone that's been in the, workplace for a long period of time, if they're making, $20,000 a year, they're not making crap. They can't prosper, and there's not a lot of jobs out there offering that, and there's a lot of people working two jobs and barely making 25. After our recession, depression, whatever you want to call it, we haven't really truly bounced back. We've been able to stabilize, but the interest rates have to go up. When that happens, inflation is going to hit your pocketbook so bad. And I do see a economic style collapse coming if that happens. me a second here. Okay. Sorry, I'm having a small issue here. Okay, well, that's not loading for some reason. Let me close this out and hopefully we can get this going. Sorry, guys. Another issue here. I think we're getting it. Okay. I have one here from Truth and Media. D.C. City Council considers bill to allow non-citizen residents to vote in city elections. The Council of the District of Columbia held hearings last week to consider the Local Resident Voting Rights Amendment Act of 2015, a bill that would expand the definition of qualified elector to include non-citizen permanent residents for the purpose of local elections. In a January statement on the bill, its author, Council Member at Large David Grosso, said all politics is local is a common phrase in the U.S. political system, and what most district residents care about are the tangible things that affect their day-to-day lives, like potholes, playgrounds, taxes, snow removal, trash collection, red light cameras, and more. All these issues are important to voters in D.C. Unfortunately, not all of our residents have to have a say in choosing the officials who make these decisions. In my opinion, that is unjust. I'm not even going to read the rest of this article because we do have unjust systems. I believe if you live somewhere, you should be able to vote. This goes into the whole immigration thing, and like I've said in the past, I'm libertarian. I believe that people should have the right to interact and travel, and I don't think that should be a bridge. The thing is, we make it really hard for people to get in, and then when we do allow them in, and definitely when we allow the illegals and give them amnesty, it's usually used for a political gain. Now, I hope there's enough smart ones coming in that they don't buy into it, but the problem is, like, with the illegals right now, they're giving them a crap load of free stuff. So they're coming from nothing and then getting a whole bunch of free stuff that they thought they were going to have to work for. So we create that system. And people are like, well, we allow murderers. Well, we have murderers here. Yeah, we allow murderers in, but how many people are going to get in that? We're not going to know are those type of people. But it's going to happen, legally and illegally. There's going to be a societal change when they come up here, even if they come up here legally. And you run that risk. Just like if someone moves from a different city or a different state into your area, that's something you're going to deal with, no matter what race or what country they come from, or city or state, or county. But the problem is, again, they do it for political reasons, and they use free stuff to buy these people. And, well, if they think, well, people are the ones that gave me free stuff, sorry, guys. Jules let me know it wasn't that loud, so here we go. If they look at it and they can say, hey, they're going to give us free stuff, and if we vote for them, they'll continue to give us free stuff. They're just seeing it as free stuff. Again, kind of like in Greece. They don't see that. Well, if they're going to give you free stuff, they got to take it first. They'll take it from you and me. They'll also take it through our freedoms. And therefore, there'll be less freedom for each generation of immigrants that come into this country. Again, that was at truthandmedia.com, formerly benswan.com. I had one here that I seen that was pretty interesting. This was from FEE.org, Foundation for Economic Education. The Freeman, America's first feminist, was a radical libertarian. Okay, it says here each week Mr. Reed will relate the stories of people whose choices and actions make them heroes. See the table of contents for previous installments. Opinions of Anne Hutchinson have, shall we say, covered the waterfront. In his masterful tone, Conceived in Liberty, 20th century economist and libertarian historian Murray Rothbard cast her as a staunch individualist and the greatest threat to the despotic Puritan theocracy of Massachusetts Bay. John Winthrop, the 2nd, 6th, 9th, and 12th governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony, thought she was a hell-spawned agent of destructive anarchy, and a woman of haughty and fierce carriage, a nimble wit and active spirit, a very voluble tongue, more bold than a man. The state of Massachusetts apparently agrees with Rothbard. A monument in the State House in Boston today calls her a courageous exponent of civil liberty and religious toleration. She was, in fact, the preeminent female crusader for a free society in 18th century New England, for which she paid first with banishment and ultimately with her life. The story is bound intimately to the Anti-Tyranny or free grace controversy involving both religion and gender. It raged in Massachusetts for the better part of 2 years, from 1636 to 1638. Hutchinson was an unconventional, charismatic woman who dared to challenge church doctrine as well as the role of women, and even discussing such things in a male-dominated society. In Saints and Secretaries, Anne Hutchinson and the um, antinomian controversy in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, historian Emery Battis wrote, "Gifted with a magnetism which is imparted to few, she had until the hour of her fall worn adherents far outnumbering her enemies, and it was only by dint and skillful maneuvering that the authorities were able to loosen her hold on the community." Antinomianism literally means against the law and was a term of derision applied against Hutchison and her Free Grace followers. While the Puritan establishment in Massachusetts argued, as good reformers of the day did, that Christian understanding derived from Scripture alone, the antinomians placed additional emphasis on an inner light by which the Holy Spirit imparted wisdom and guidance to believing individuals one at a time. As I do understand it, Hutchinson herself explained, laws, commands, rules, and edicts are for those who have not the light which makes plain the pathway. He who has God's grace in his heart cannot go astray. Barely a century after Martin Luther sparked the great divide known as the Reformation, the Protestant leaders of Massachusetts saw Antinomianism as dangerously heretical. Their theological forebears broke from Rome in part because they saw the teachings of priests, bishops, and popes as the words of presumptuous intermediaries, divisionaries by mortals from the divine word of God. When Anne Hutchinson and other antinomians spoke of this supplemental inner light, it seemed to the Puritan establishment that the Reformation itself was being undone. Worse still, Hutchinson accused church leaders in Massachusetts of reverting to the pre-Reformation notion of justification by works instead of Martin Luther, John Calvin perspective of justification by faith alone through God's free grace. In England, where she was born in 1591, Hutchinson had followed the teachings of the dynamic preacher John Cotton, from whom she traced some of her anti-establishment ideas. When Cotton was compelled to leave the country in 1633, Hutchinson and her family followed him to New England. There she would live until death just 10 years later, stirring up one fuss after another and serving as an active midwife and caregiver to the sick simultaneously. That she found the time to do all this while raising 15 children of her own is a tribute to her energy and passion. Hutchinson organized discussion groups, conventicles, attended by dozens of women and eventually many men too. This in itself was a bold move. It was empowering, especially the women who were supposed to remain quiet and subordinate to their husbands, particularly in matters of religion and governance. But Hutchinson's meetings were full of critical talk about the errors in recent sermons and the intolerant ways in which the men of Massachusetts ran the colony. Her influence grew rapidly, and by all accounts, Boston became a stronghold of antinomianism, while the countryside aligned with the establishment. It was only a matter of time before religious and gender differences spilled over into politics. In 1636, Hutchinson and her antinomian Free Grace allies such as Cotton, Reverend John Wheelwright, and Governor Henry Bell came under blistering attack by the Orthodox Puritan clergy. In churches and public meetings, they were assailed as heretics and disturbers of the peace who threatened the very existence of the Puritan experiment in New England. Accusations of immoral sexual conduct, thoroughly unfounded, swirled in flurry. Cotton was sidelined by the pressure. Wheelwright was found guilty of contempt and sedition for having purposely set himself to kindle and increase strife within the colony, and was banished from Massachusetts. Bell was defeated for re-election, and a Hutchinson enemy, John Winthrop, became governor in 1637. Despite initial wavering under the intense pressure, Hutchinson held firm. In 1637, Winthrop arranged for Hutchinson to be put on trial on the charge of slandering the ministries of Massachusetts Bay. He declared that she had troubled the peace of the Commonwealth and churches by promoting unsanctioned opinions and holding unauthorized meetings in her home. Though she had never voiced her views outside the conventicles she held, or ever signed any statements or petitions about them, Winthrop portrayed her as a co-conspirator who had goaded others to challenge authority before the court. With Hutchinson present, he charged, "You have spoken divers things as we have been informed, which are very prejudicial to the honor of the churches and ministers thereof, and you have maintained a meeting and an assembly in your house that have been condemned by the General Assembly as a thing not tolerable, nor commonly in the sight of God, nor fitting for your sex." Hutchinson mostly stonewalled the prosecution, but occasionally shot back with a fiery rejoinder like this one: "Do you think it not lawful for me to teach women, and why do you call me to teach the court?" The first day of the trial went reasonably well for her. One biographer, Richard Morris, said she outfenced the magistrates in a battle of wits. Another biographer, Yves Laplante, wrote, "Her success before the court may have astonished her judges, but it was no surprise to her. She was confident of herself and her intellectual tools, largely because of the intimacy she felt with God." The second day didn't go as well after a moment of high drama when Hutchinson cut loose with this warning: "You have no power over my body, neither can you do me any harm, for I am in the hands of the eternal Jehovah, my Savior. I am at his appointment. The bounds of my habituation are cast in heaven. No further do I esteem of any mortal man than creatures in his hand. I fear none but the great Jehovah, which hath foretold me of these things, and I do verily believe that he will deliver me out of your hands. Therefore take heed how you proceed against me, for I know that for this you go about to do to me. God will ruin you and your posterity and this whole state." What Winthrop and his prosecutors hadn't yet proved, Hutchinson handed them in one stroke. This was all the evidence of sedition and contempt of court that they needed. She was convicted, labeled an instrument of the devil, and a woman not fit for our society, banished from Massachusetts Bay. This was verdict over civil trial. She would be detained for 4 months under house arrest, rarely able to see her family until a church trial that would determine her fate as a member of the Puritan faith. In that trial, because she would not admit to certain theological mistakes, she was formally excommunicated with this denunciation from Reverend Thomas Shepard. I do cast you out and deliver you on to Satan, and account you from this time forth to be a heathen and a publican. I command you in the name of Jesus Christ and of this church as a leper to withdraw yourself out of the congregation. Hutchinson, her husband William, and their children departed Boston in April 1638. They trudged for nearly a week in snow to get to Providence, Rhode Island, founded by Roger Williams as a haven for persecuted minorities. 5 years later, on a terrible day in August 1643, Anne and her entire family, but for one daughter, was massacred by marauding Sewanee Indians. The woman who rocked a colony was gone, but as Rothbard writes, the spirit of liberty that she embodied and kindled was to outlast the despotic theocracy of Massachusetts Bay. Says here, as America's first feminist, a woman of conscience and principle, Anne Hutchinson planted seeds of libertarianism that would grow and help establish a new nation a little more than a century later. And that's from FEE.org, Foundation for Economic Education. So go check that out. Really, really good article. We got about 8 minutes left. I have one here from Newsweek.com. Is Donald Trump a fascist? Just a few weeks ago, Donald Trump was a crank and joke. Living proof that making lots of money doesn't mean you have the answers, and further proof that being a capitalist doesn't mean you necessarily like or understand capitalism. His dabbling in politics was widely regarded as a silly distraction. This week, he leads the polls among the pack of Republican aspirants to the office of President of the United States, while all the other candidates are following the rules, playing the media, saying the right things, obeying the civic conventions. Trump is taking the opposite approach. He doesn't care. He says whatever. Thousands gather at his rallies to thrill to the moment. Suddenly, he is serious, if only for a time, and hence it is a time to take his political worldview seriously. I just heard Trump speak live. The speech lasted an hour, and my jaw was on the floor most of the time. I never before witnessed such a brazen display of nativistic jingoism, along with a complete disregard for economic reality. It was an awesome experience, a perfect repudiation of all good sense and intellectual sobriety. Yes, he is against the establishment, against existing conventions. It also serves as an important reminder, as bad as the status quo is, things could be worse. Trump is dedicated to taking us there. His speech was like an interwar seance of once powerful dictators who inspired multitudes, drove countries into the ground, and died grim deaths. I keep thinking of books like John T. Flynn's As We Go Marching, especially Chapter 10, that so brilliantly chronicles a form of statism that swept Europe in 1930s. It grew up in the ferment of failed economies, cultural upheaval, and social instability, and it lives by stoking the fires of bourgeois resentment. Since World War II, the ideologic he represents has usually lived in dark corners, and we don't even have a name for it anymore. The right name, the correct name, the historically accurate name is fascism. I don't use that word as an insult, only it is accurate. Though hardly anyone talks about it today, we really should. It is still real. It exists. It is distinct. It is not going away. Trump has tapped into it, absorbing onto his own political ambitions every conceivable resentment, race, class, sex, religion, economic, and promising a new order of things under his mighty hand. You would have to be hopelessly ignorant of modern history not to see the outlines and where they end up. I want to laugh about what he said, like reading a comic book version of Franco, Mussolini, and Hitler, and truly I did laugh as he denounced the existence of tech support in India that serves American companies. How can it be cheaper to call people there than here? As if he still thinks that long distance charges apply. But in politics, history shows that laughter can turn too quickly to tears. So, what does Trump actually believe? He does have a philosophy, though it takes a bit of insight and historical understanding to discern it. Ugh. Sorry, let me get a drink of water here. Of course, race baiting is essential to the ideology, and there was plenty of that when a Hispanic man asked a question. Trump interrupted him and asked if he had been sent by the Mexican government. He took it a step further, dividing blacks from Hispanics by inviting a black man to the microphone to tell how his own son was killed by an illegal immigrant. Because Trump is the only one who speaks this way, he can count on support from the darkest elements of American life. He does. Looks like I lost it again there. Trump also tosses little bones to the religious right, enough to allow them to believe that he represents their interests. Yes, it's implausible and hilarious. At the speech I heard, he pointed out that he is a Presbyterian and thus he is personally affected every time ISIS beheads a Christian. But as much as racial and religious resentment is part of his radical, oh apparatus. It is not his core. His core is about business, his own business, and his acumen thereof. He is living proof that being a successful capitalist is no predictor of one's application for an actual free market. Stealing, not trading, is more his style. It only implies a love of money and a longing for power that comes with it. Trump has both. What do capitalists on his level do? They beat the competition. What does he believe he should do as president? Beat the competition, which means other countries, which means wage and trade wars. If you listen to him, you would suppose that the United States is in some sort of massive apocalyptic struggle for supremacy with China, India, Malaysia, and pretty much everyone else in the world. It takes a bit to figure out that this could mean. He speaks of the United States as if it were one thing, one single firm, a business. We are in a competition with them, as if the country was IBM competing against Samsung, Apple, or Dell. We are not 300 million people pursuing unique dreams and ideas with special tastes or interests, cooperating with people around the world to build prosperity. We are doing one thing, that is being part of one business.
Check that.